Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Chelsea versus Bournemouth, a 1-0 victory that we had last night. And yes, we conceded a penalty. Robert Sanchez, the maestro goalkeeper, who I've said all along is a wonderful goalkeeper, managed to save it. And yes, we did have 1.78, I should say, XG against us. And yes, we also conceded 19 shots. So you might be thinking, yeah, this wasn't the best performance, Josh. I don't know why you're feeling so chipper about it. And well, I'll tell you one thing. I'll give that some negativity, a little bit of oxygen, in that I will give one player that I think from this performance should never play for Chelsea again. But I'll save that until the end. But I think that's the end of the negativity. Ultimately, we've got the 3 points from this match. We're going back up to the table towards the promised land of Champions League football, sitting in 7th place as it stands right now. And ultimately, I think we've got to take some positives from this game. So before we get into a line-by-line analysis, why don't we talk about the team sheet and the formation? So in this game, we had Robert Sanchez in goal, as I've said, wonderful goalkeeper, never doubted him for a second. Disasi at right back, which is an interesting one. Then you had Colwill and Fofana and Cucurella at left back. Then we had Caicedo and Veiga. Veiga obviously is a makeshift DM, but he's played DM before. I've said that earlier in the season in that I think he could probably fill in more there, bearing in mind we could have a lot of injuries this season in the centre mid area, and I think he conducted himself fairly well for his first game in the Premier League in that role. Then you had Noni on the right, you had Neto on the left, Cole Palmer playing through the middle, and Jackson up top. Now, what we always do in this analysis of the team sheet, we always look at the average positions, but I don't think the average positions are that telling in this game. Let's have a look at them in particular and see why. The main thing that I saw in this game is that individual players were moving formation and moving position throughout the match. So it's very difficult to actually analyse how they set up in a particular system. So, for example, Fofana had to go out and play at right back, so his position in the average formations is a little bit weird. And then you've also got players like Cole Palmer, who again also moved out. So it's a little bit harsh to judge his formation and his position because he was all over the place, wasn't he? He was swapping positions. But there is a few things that it tells us. And by the way, if you want these graphics, there's a link in the description. You can download SofaScore for yourself. It's a wonderful app. I use it all the time. And these graphics are super useful when you're looking at analysing a game and trying to figure out what happened. So the stuff that I learned from this is Cucurella. What was going on with him today? So interesting, his positioning. Obviously, he's got Veiga in front of him, who can very easily fill in at left back and is probably the sort of backup left back. But Cucurella was taking up some positions almost as a 10 in the match, which I found fascinating. Then, obviously, you know, as I say, Veiga is then plugging the gaps. He's then sort of dropping in, and you see by his position, he was very central, and that was because he was kind of all over the place, to be fair. Palmer was also coming deep to get the ball, and I think you saw that a lot in the first half. Palmer was sort of dropping in and trying to pick up possession and be that sort of player that is playing the long balls over the top, playing passes, playing forward balls, and I love that because ultimately he's trying to get on the ball and he's one of our best players, so I don't mind that at all. And then Disasi was an interesting one in that he was the deepest of all of the sort of the nominal centre backs, if you think about it, because Disasi is effectively a centre back in this formation with Cucurella inverting and pushing up. And that is interesting in that, you know, he was so far deep, even though he's meant to be a right back, which, you know, it tells you everything you need to know about this sort of inverted system. And it's very interesting what Maresca plays. Beyond that, I don't think there are many different things with this setup in the way that Maresca wants to play. The wingers were high and wide. We expected that. Jackson was all over the place trying to drop in and make things happen. And Caicedo, more than anyone, was all over the place in that he was trying to win the ball back for us. So while we're on that, why don't we talk a little bit about central midfielders, because I think this is a key area that we need to look at. Obviously, we didn't have Dewsbury-Hall and Enzo for this game, which I think came out of a bit of the blue for us. I was certainly surprised that Dewsbury-Hall was not on the bench. But Enzo, again, he's been travelling, fair enough. He might have picked up a knock. We'll have to see more detail on that. I haven't heard too much at the moment. But the fact that we've had to sort of have a makeshift centre midfielder already in the season, as I say with Veiga, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty worried about it, to be honest with you. And the fact that we did offload Cucurella and Santos in what we know is a very injury-prone central midfield says a lot about us right now. And obviously, Cucurella, I watched some of the game against Man United, in which he's playing. He's now at Southampton, obviously. I thought he played really, really well. And ultimately, in pre-season as well, he was coming up with goals. He was sort of, you know, doing some fantastic tackles. So I don't really understand why you loan both of these players. And then you've got players like Caicedo on the bench, who, let's be honest, we didn't really want from the get-go. But he's never going to get on the pitch, and he also isn't really even a DM. So I just find it really weird. And I think also we've got to talk about Dewsbury-Hall in himself. Conor Gallagher played almost every single minute that he could possibly play in the games last season. And yet Dewsbury-Hall comes in. First question is, do we even know that he's a better player? Second question is, do we know that he's going to be as fit and as available as Conor Gallagher? And obviously all of these guys in charge of the money are worried about getting that cash in and doing it basically via all of the academy players. We know that's the system. It's going to carry on happening. But you have to say these players that they've replaced them with, you really do question whether they're as good as the players that we've lost. And with Conor Gallagher as an example, just his availability alone would indicate that he should be in and around the squad. And I find that Dewsbury-Hall move, if he is going to be, injury prone and isn't necessarily up to even the standard, he's always going to be a bench player, which, let's be honest, how is he going to break into the team over an Enzo and Caicedo? It's worrying. And before I move on from the centre mids, I'll tell you what we do have to talk about. We have to talk about Caicedo. I think ultimately he was maligned so much at the start of last season. People were saying he wasn't good enough. People were saying he was going to be a complete flop. And I do think he is so unrecognised as a player. Amazing tackles, running all over the pitch, often completely isolated, alone, in that central area. And yet he just does the things, like easy things, so well. And he mops up so many dangerous opportunities against us. If he really does get an out-and-out wonderful partner alongside him, in which, Enzo needs to step up or Lavia needs to become the guy. If we do nail that, I'm ultimately not worried about our centre mids for a very long time. But the thing is, we are worried about it because the injuries keep on happening. And if Caicedo doesn't have that support, I'm really, really worried about it. But it's not all about the centre mids. Ultimately, I've made my point here. I think we can do better. And I ultimately do think we should just bring some of those players back that we're missing. I'd love to see Cucurella or Santos. Ultimately, I do think Cucurella is slightly further along than Santos is, in that he's got that Premier League move and potentially, more physical and ready for the Premier League. And his pressures, but we'll see what happens with that. But moving on now to the goalkeeper. And look, I'm going to put my hands up now. I need to make a formal apology to Robert Sanchez. I didn't rate this guy, and ultimately I was one of those commentators that was saying that Jorgensen should be the man that starts in the net for Chelsea, and I think Robert has proved me wrong in this match. Ultimately, yes, he did give away the penalty, but what an awful pass that was from Wesley Fofana. Absolutely did him in there, and really, I mean, what else could Sanchez do? He couldn't really get out of the way, and I think sometimes those penalty shouts are a bit harsh. Because what is the goalkeeper going to do? Ultimately, it probably would have been better if he just dived out of the way. The ball wasn't really going anywhere near the net. Disasi shepherded it out. But Sanchez gets himself up, dusts himself down, and manages to make a wonderful save to his left-hand side. It was interesting, there was some press after the match in that Robert Sanchez said, yeah, I'm just going to wait for this guy. I know what he does. He waits for the goalkeeper to dive and then puts it the other way, and I'm just going to wait for him. And he did that so well. And that, saving penalties these days is incredibly difficult with the sort of the legislation about not being able to move and that sort of thing off the line. Robert Sanchez played exquisitely, and ultimately, really, if we're being honest, he kept us in the game so many other times as well. Like throughout the match, he really performed very, very well. There's still some question marks about his passing. There were a few loose balls, but ultimately now, I don't think there are many people that are going to be saying Jorgensen should be starting immediately, straight away, based on this. And I have to say, I've really slagged him off, and I really want to make this point very clear now. We need to give Robert Sanchez some credit. Getting up and being able to mentally compete at this top level when there is so much pressure on goalkeepers, so many signings. We got 9 goalkeepers now on the books. Goalkeepers for the future, goalkeepers for the now in Jorgensen, people saying that he should be starting. Petrovic was on his case last season and actually disposed him. And yet this guy mentally just carried on focusing on his training, focused on getting better, and he's managed to break into this Maresca team and does look like the out-and-out number one goalkeeper right now based on his performances. And I don't think you can argue that. Let me know in the comments what you think. As I say, I've always been an exponent of Jorgensen, but I'm really interested to hear what you guys think. So let me know if you want Sanchez to be the regular goalkeeper. Next thing I want to talk about are the substitutions. Now, I think last season, Mauricio Pochettino got a lot of slack by not doing substitutions quick enough, and sometimes they weren't the right substitutions, and also it was the frequency of them. We weren't quite sure whether he was making enough changes in-game to really affect it in the era of 5 substitutions. But credit to Enzo Maresca. I think he completely changed the game with his substitutions. And I think, to be fair to Pochettino, Maresca seems to have a lot more ammunition off the bench to actually come and change the game. But let's be honest, these individual subs changed the game. Obviously, it was Sancho on at half-time for Neto. It was Felix at 61 for Noni. Tosin came on at the same time for Disasi. And then Nkunku came on at 79 minutes for Jackson, which was, let's be honest, a brave substitution in that Jackson is our out-and-out number 9 and was creating a lot of chances throughout the match. Didn't manage to get his goal away, which was not very good for my fantasy football team, but we'll forgive him for that. Let's go one by one and analyse them. So, Sancho, inspired substitution at half-time. Neto, slightly worried about him actually at the moment, in that he's getting in matches but he's not really affecting the game beyond that Wolves match, and that's concerning, in that if he doesn't put the performances in, Sancho is easily going to be starting matches. And let's be honest, I think we're all in agreement really, he should probably be starting matches right now after that performance. I wasn't sort of aware of how good his footwork and his ability to beat a player was, and I think for a young player, a 24-year-old with a potential buyout clause of 25 million quid, it's not really that much for a player of that quality. So yes, we're paying him a lot of wages. I believe it is similar to what the wage bill that we are paying him at Manchester United, near enough 250 grand a week, which is a lot of money and potentially sort of groundbreaking money in terms of our squad. But if he's putting output like this, you have to say he's looking worth it, to be fair. Like, individually, let's analyse what he was doing. He was beating players exquisitely well. I think his passing was also really underrated. He was able to sort of do those reverse passes through the lines and make stuff happen. Cucurella, he set up, who did a few really good crosses in this game that no one managed to get on the end of. And I do think that sort of incisive passing, that unselfishness, is something that we do miss on the wings. I love it with Sancho, because I do think he's got that mix of sort of arrogance, in that he tries to beat players, get shots away, but also he is unselfish and makes those passes. So ultimately, I think we do have to just have a bit of a moment for Sancho and just go, this guy could absolutely be starting for us, and I'm really excited to see if that happens. The next player that we have to talk about is Felix. Less sort of explosive in terms of his impact, but overall, what a player that we have there, and what a player to be able to bring off the bench and technically able to. Obviously, he's got a lot of competition in front of him, and ultimately we do really see him more as a central player, really, I think, in terms of that number 10 role. Obviously, when he came on, Palmer went out to the wing, and that shows you how basically we do view Felix as a central player, and his best ability is to be able to get in the box and be in that number 10 role, especially when you compare that to how good Palmer has been, and yet Palmer isn't playing in that role. So I think it's very interesting. I think really we do need to see more of his technical ability and his goal scoring ability, because he's so good at that. But I do think at the moment that's going to come more often than not off the bench, because he isn't impacting games that sort of expressly when he is coming on. I do want to just talk about Noni for a second, in that Felix came on for Noni. We need to see more consistency from his performances. We've said it over and over again about Noni, in that what he needs to do is get a run of games where he's getting those unbelievable performances. What we see at the moment is he has a 10 out of 10 performance and then a 6 out of 10 performance, and ultimately I think that might be a little bit harsh on him in this game, in that he did do things and he was alright, but really, if we're being completely honest, fairly anonymous. Let me know if that's too harsh in the comments. Then let's talk about Tosin. I don't want to go on about this, but I did kind of say that Tosin should be starting this game in the centre-back role. And what was interesting was that, Disasi comes off, Tosin slots in the centre-back, Fofana goes to right-back. And yeah, that's what I said should happen in the Joe United podcast. Don't want to say that I should be managing Chelsea, but I'm happy to take the call if they want to offer me the job. But I do think we looked a lot more solid when Tosin was playing in that role, and obviously having Wesley next to him and a back three of Wesley, Tosin and Colwill, I'm not worried about that sort of grouping at all. And I do think when Cucurella is inverting and then comes back and defends and helps, that's a decent unit. And I do think if we are missing Gusto and Reece James for any part of the season, then that's probably the way to go. The only caveat to that is, Josh Champong is waiting on the sideline, didn't even really get in the squad on this game. And I think that's harsh, bearing in mind the injuries, and really a lot of what Maresca has been saying is that this guy is the next guy coming through and is going to be the next unbelievable talent that we've got coming through the academy, and yet he can't even get in matchday squads in a performance in which we're missing our 2 first choice right backs. So I do think that's very, very harsh. But let's be honest, Tosin's impact completely changed the game. We looked way more solid, kind of not guaranteed that we were going to have a clean sheet from that point, but we were definitely more solid and way more solid than Disasi. And ultimately, he's got a lot of question marks against him right now because, for Tosin to come on and look so cool and calm and acknowledged on the ball, it's worrying for Disasi, and you do sort of question whether he'll get in the team in the future. The last player that we do have to talk about is Nkunku. He came on, and you have to say, the finish that he had on that goal was just ridiculous. We know how good he is in tight spaces in the box. We've seen it against Liverpool. We've seen it in various other games for Chelsea. But his finishing ability was quality, and I was so chuffed for him to get that goal because there've been a lot of people questioning him, a lot of people removing him from their fantasy teams, but a lot of people also just in the press saying, is this guy actually as good as we think he is anymore? Like, is the injury that significant that it's completely changed his game? So I think he has answered a lot of their critics, and as a false nine, we know that he's never going to hold on to the ball and be a sort of an out and out number 9, but as a false 9, he's very, very effective for us. The question mark that I have around him is really how effective is he going to be from the start? Because I do think, he's coming off the bench, he's impacting matches, he is almost like that super sub, that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer role for us right now. And I think I want to see what he's going to do in the Europa League, in the Conference League, I should say. I keep saying Europa League because I kind of want us to be there. In the Conference League, I should say, because I think if he does do those performances and he looks exquisite on the ball there and he gets more goals, then obviously he'll be pushing it. But there is a lot of competition in that central role. As I said earlier on, Palmer in front of him, Felix potentially in front of him. And so that number 10 role is going to be difficult for him to take. But as a number 9 coming off the bench, obviously, he can impact the game. But I do want to see him start more games because he's technically that good. Let me know what you guys think as well in the comments. Is Nkunku good enough to start for us? I promised that I'd talk about one player to close this video out that I don't think should ever play for Chelsea again. I mentioned him various times in this video, and I'll give you 3 seconds to guess who you think it's going to be. Yes, it's Disasi. You got it right. This guy, I think we have to acknowledge he wasn't playing in his preferred position, but wow, he had a stinker in this game. Was often out of position, was often getting dragged around. There was a moment in which a ball gets played to a winger, the winger beats Disasi, runs on, and there's sort of like that sort of indecision between who it should be. Should it be Fofana pressing or Disasi? Disasi just leaves his man. And I think that's absolutely horrendous for any defender in any role, even if you're playing out of position, to be honest with you. So I do think with his passing and his lack of coolness at the back and the way that Tosin came in and looked so secure and the way that Fofana looks so decent actually as a right back backup means that we're going to see a lot less of Disasi. And I think my overwhelming point on this, and something that I really do think we need to discuss, is that another one of these players that we've signed isn't as good as one of the players that we've let go. Trevor Chalobah has gone to Crystal Palace, and we as fans, we all know that not only does Trevor have a better ceiling than Disasi, he's a better player than Disasi right now. And the fact that we've pushed Trev out and not even included him in the squad over a player like Disasi, who, let's be honest, we were actually trying to get rid of. I think that's quite clear based on the bomb squad or based on what was going on in the summer. The fact that it's been that way round is an indication that actually that's a failure by the transfer committee and the transfer guys in charge, the directors of football. And I do think, as much as we acknowledge some of the successes that they've had, in that we've said that Sancho is brilliant and Nkunku is coming back into it, and Lavia looks like a really good player if he can play, and Caicedo is looking brilliant, and all of these other players like Neto, didn't look amazing today, but looks like a very, very astute signing. Noni, not a lot of money. As much as we've had these successes, you do have to point out some of the failures, and I think the Badiashile and Disasi have both been failures at Chelsea, and I don't think really that's too harsh when you compare the players that they've replaced. Like, let's be honest, we could have had a Mark Guehi at the back, and we could have had a Trevor as well. And the fact that we're even in conversations to bring a player like Mark Guehi back indicates that really what we should be doing is less obsessed with this sort of transfer income and potentially a bit more obsessed with how good our academy players are. And I think that's a point that we really need to sort of push on and sort of make sure that the director of football sort of understands, because it's so important to us as fans. Now, before I go, I just want to give one little shout out to our boy, Joey Knight, who managed a unbelievable performance in his fight last night. Didn't come away with the victory, lost on points in the Misfits event in Newcastle. I just have to say, we're all so proud of him, and what I want to do is just send him some love now. You know, it's not easy going out there, putting your all on the line, putting everything out there that he does, training for weeks on end, you know, doing everything that he does to get down to the right weight and train and be ready for these events. They're so difficult. So we have to just say, and please do leave him a comment below and go and send him some messages of love and support from the Chelsea fan base, because this guy is an absolute legend. I'm so proud of him. Yeah, big shout out to Joey, and we will be in the studio soon. I can't wait to record with him. But yeah, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. What I will do before I go is just mention this. I've partnered up with a brand called sportsbreaks.com. There'll be a link in the description below. If you do want to pick up any Chelsea tickets, you can do so via them. They also do packages where they give away like transport plus a Chelsea ticket, or even hotel room. So if you come in from abroad or you come in from somewhere else in the UK and you want to go and come down, enjoy a game, get a hotel afterwards and relax, these guys are the guys to go for. They are an unbelievable company, giving some really good experiences, and I'm really excited basically because I'll be I'm able to share with you guys some tickets for Chelsea, which I know so many of you are desperate to try and get, and it's actually really difficult to get. So yeah, go and check those guys out. There's a link in the description, and I'll leave you there. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please do subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.